Give me chocolate nuts.
Ready on this side?
Oh, yeah.
Really? Is this stand up? Is this stand up?
Y'all are evil. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Eustis City Hall. This is the local planning agency meeting. It's 5 o'clock Thursday, November the 17th, 2022. Is there a quorum present, proper notice been given?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Consideration and discussion, public hearings and recommendations. Mike?
Yes, sir. Good evening. For the record, Mike Lane, Development Services Director. You have before you tonight two items. One is a comprehensive plan amendment, and the other is a land development code amendment, or land development regulations amendment, rather. And these are related to your October the 3rd workshop related to backyard chickens and MAP 19 and density for 3 units per acre. So we will start tonight with proposed ordinance number 2235, which is actually the comprehensive plan portion. And of course, this is the amendment for the creation of what we're calling the Rural Residential Transitional, RRT Land Use District. And this will go in the future land use element and the table of contents of the comprehensive plan. It will also remove MAP 19 related to the Joint Planning Agreement, or the JPA boundary, and the associated references, replacing the references to the approved JPA between Lake County and the city. So at the September 22nd City Commission meeting, Gunster Law Firm had discussed MAP 19 with you and had recommended that it be removed and that it wouldn't jeopardize the joint planning agreement between Lake County and the city. And so at the October the 3rd City Commission meeting, you had instructed us to bring forward the amendment to remove MAP 19, and that's what we're doing with this particular proposal. And let's see. In addition to the removal of MAP 19, you had requested the RRT category, or a category which involved a 3 dwelling units per acre type category, somewhere between the suburban residential and the rural residential future land use districts. And so we're bringing forward tonight what we're calling the Rural Residential Transitional District to insert in there. So the suburban residential category or district is actually the 5 units per acre, and the rural residential is 1 per 5. So again, this one would be 3 dwelling units per acre. So, and again, this will basically be between the single or the suburban residential and the rural residential category. As part of your packet, we've included the various language that is related to this particular category. guess at the end of the day, the staff's recommendation is to approve the amendment and transmit to the Department of Economic Opportunity. So.
And technically here at the LPA, you are just forwarding this to the City Commission for discussion.
Any questions of Mike? Anyone in the public like to speak on this?
I do have 2 speaker cards,
Okay,
both for this and the next item on the agenda.
that's fine.
Cindy Newton.
All right. Leslie, you can hold on. You don't need to fill one out right now. I'll get to you. You're fine. Yes, ma'am. Hey, Cindy.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Cindy Newton, unincorporated Lake County. The JPA map 19 has been ignored for quite a while within your comp plan as the developments have been approved. The original JPA back in 1987 does seem to establish boundaries, and there is an attachment showing a map, but this original map attached was not honored. DeVaries and Mount Dora have encroached on that boundary. They were allowed to do so, and the city ended up accepting that. So the map does not reflect the accurate boundaries for the JPA. So the plan to remove map 19 and instead refer to the joint planning agreement would not be referring to the correct JPA boundaries as with the encroachment. So as you know, there are many problems with the JPA as a whole. The conditions were never met. Of the 8 conditions, only 1 is being met currently, and that's notifying the county when there's annexing. In 1990, RH&S worked with Eustis on the comp plan. There was a discussion about the future land use map at that time, and changes were to be made. On February 15th, 1991, Eustis sent a letter to the Department of Community Affairs with the transmission of the comp plan, which states, the city comprehension plan is based on a joint planning agreement agreed upon between the city of Eustis and Lake County in pursuit of an interlocal agreement entered into July of 1987. This agreement specifies in section 1.4 that the city will prepare the plan for the area, and section 1.5, the county will adopt the plan for the unincorporated area. Because of this agreement, the city of Eustis comprehension plan includes both incorporated and unincorporated areas. So if the JPA map 19 is removed, there will not be an unincorporated part of the plan, which according to the RS&H, goes against the JPA in general. And according to your own city attorney, when he spoke on the issue, that there's no time frame within the JPA. So it doesn't say you shall do this in year, or in 10 years or 50 years. But when there's an absence of a specific duration, the courts will usually impose a reasonability standard. And there hasn't been a formal amendment to this agreement in 35 years. The conditions still haven't been met, except for Eustis notifying about the annexations. So I'd really like not to see you weaken this JPA even more, but instead continue to work with the county on a new JPA and put all this aside until you can work out that agreement so that you don't have another issue with the one you currently have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tammy Pena.
Hi, Tammy.
Tammy Pena, 35800 Burgess Terrace. What staff has provided today for your review and approval allows for a contradiction that conflicts between the comp plan and the land use regulations, as well as not meeting your request for the commission to have a land use district that's between the current SR and RR with respect to intensity and density. Under this ordinance for the comp plan section, under definitions of future land use designation, special provisions, staff is recommending adding an additional special provision to the proposed new R2 land use that currently does not exist on the suburban residential district. This special provision number 3, which would allow a decrease in minimal open space requirements within the Wakiva protection overlay from 35% to 25% if specific vegetation is not present. This would allow less open space required in the new RRT land use than what is currently required for the suburban residential land use? How is this transition from SR to RR to decrease the intensity and density if it allows less minimal open space than what the SR requires? Take a breath. So I ask that you deny this transition to the commission unless you remove this additional provision 3 from the proposed RRT land use, since it contradicts the purpose and intent that you requested. Even in the last year's October workshop, when we were discussing the proposed SRT, this reduction to the 25% was not existing there as well. Thank you.
Pat Duncan?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Pat Duncan, and I live in unincorporated Lake County. I'd like to thank you tonight for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to comment on the proposed agricultural land use designations up for discussion and vote. Eustis, as well as other communities within Lake County, participated in a series of workshops with the Lake County Board of Commissioners. Its purpose was to identify topics of concern related to inconsistent land development regulations and criteria for development. All in attendance agreed that each had many areas of concern regarding growth in our area, but they would all work together in trying to address these issues. The county commissioners have since created or are in the process of submitting a new rural conservation subdivision agreement. In reading through this, it seems while there is much agreement between the two, the devil is in the details. The purpose, again, of the workshops was to have developed countrywide standards, but I'm not sure that Eustis is bought into the entire package. I'd like to ask that before you move forward on this, you at least have a discussion with the county on a consistent direction. As we all know that Lake County is developing rapidly, and I think we would all like to see common sense, sustainable, and environmental policies enacted to protect this unique area we call home. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
That's it for cards on this item.
Leslie? Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to be here, and I really like your new digs. I haven't been here since you did your remodeling. It looks awesome.
Looks a lot better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks great. A couple things. I think some of the comments made previously are really good comments, like with regard to that open space requirement. I think that might have just been an oversight because you would seem like if you're moving into a rural transition area, one of the things you definitely want to have is your open space, because you can use that open space to create buffers between adjoining properties that might have much lower density, and then you kind of create that buffer in between. But I did send an email over this afternoon. Unfortunately, I had thought that it had gotten out to each of you over the last couple of days, so you'd have time to digest it. So I'm hoping maybe you saw it this afternoon and had a chance to read it, but real quickly I can kind of go over it. It's a concept for how we could potentially work together to accomplish something we've been trying to do for the last several years, which was to master plan this area, but do it in basically 30 days. And the way that we would do it would be to take the language that you're working on tonight and make some modifications to it, where you actually work in the rural conservation subdivision design, so that that could be the tool that is used, the criteria that's used when you're considering the rural transition land use. And another possibility would be to actually make it a requirement of your rural transition land use that you have a PUD overlay, so that it's not just a straight zoning, but it's a zoning and a land use that actually is looking at the specific property itself. What natural features does it have? Does it have springs on the property, or creeks, or vast changes in elevation, unique habitat, karst features, what's around it? The kind of things that you're able to look at with a PUD overlay that would be site-specific. And that's really, to a large degree, what our rural conservation design criteria does. It looks at each individual site, and it requires the planners and the developers to actually walk the site, look at the site, and get on the site itself and come up with designs that are unique to that site and take into account the surrounding area as well. So The 3 units to the acre, one thing that I noticed, if just a straight 3 units to the acre, I think the problem with it being the rural transition density is that basically the Mayhill subdivision at Bates and Estes, that came out to about 3 units to the acre the way that it's developed. So that will be your prototype from Estes all the way to Sorrento if you go forward with your RT the way that it's being proposed tonight. And it seems to me like that prototype doesn't fit the Wekiva study area. It doesn't fit the sort of rural, semi-rural character of everything that's east of Eustis going out into towards the Wekiva protection area itself and within the Wekiva River Basin, that this area would be a perfect location to actually incorporate rural conservation design standards. It would be unique to the entire county because it would be special and it would apply to the Wekiva study area, and it would be a collaboration between Eustis and Lake County because we essentially would both be applying the same criteria, whether it was a project that came in the unincorporated area or it was a project that was contiguous to the city and coming into the city, we both would be using the same type of criteria. So there would be that continuity, you know, in 20, 30, 40 years from now, looking back, I think it would make a huge difference in how this entire area develops, and it would take into account, you know, the environmental things that make this area unique and just that character that it has, that it's got that rural, semi-rural feel. And, you know, at the end of the day, I know you guys want to grow. I mean, that's, you know, it's clear that you want to expand your municipal boundaries. Developers will argue you got to have high density or you can't pay for the utilities. And there are some ways to work around that too. One of the things we're using is on-site waste distributive system, which lowers your cost of extending sewer lines significantly. When you're clustering, you can lower your infrastructure cost. You can also do some partnerships where the city is taking on the capital cost of getting the water lines there, so that's not on the developer to increase their density to be able to afford, you know, paying for all those things. So you can definitely make this work, and I think that 30 days, I mean, everybody would have to roll up their sleeves, but the staffs, they have the expertise and the ability to take this language and blend it together, I think, in a way that could be a win-win. And for all the time that we spend in this and all the aggravation and all of the back and forth, it would be amazing if we could actually come out of this and end up with something that's very much like a master plan. One other point about the rural design that's really cool is that it has as a minimum a 100-foot perimeter buffer. So if you did that for every project from here to Sorrento, you literally would create a network of wildlife corridors, because you would have these buffers around properties, and then as each new property came along and lined up, you would have these corridors where at least we're not covering everything over with neighborhoods and asphalts and, you know, yards that are mowed and have fertilizer on them. We would actually have some areas that could provide that interconnectivity all the way through this Wekiva River study area. So I think we could have a win-win. I just ask you guys to consider that and consider a 30-day postponement with a time certain that it would come back with new language that would include a PD overlay or an incorporation of the rural conservation design. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Nothing else from you?
That's it as far as cards.
Okay. Anyone else like to speak on this topic? Not seeing anybody, we'll bring it back to the commission. Tom, anything you want to finish up with on this one?
Sure. So Mike and or Jeff, on the issue of open space requirement, can either of you talk a little bit about the proposed open space requirement for suburban, for RRT versus what is existing in suburban residential?
As the guilty party, for the record, Jeff Richardson, Deputy Director for Development Services. As the guilty party, I took the criteria from the suburban residential and basically used that as the template with shifting the density down and more towards the rural residential. Even the definition as put in for description of the district did not really include everything of the rural residential, but it also didn't include everything of the suburban neighborhood, i.e. we didn't include the density bonus that the suburban residential would allow within the RRT. We made that more like the rural residential. And at the 3 dwelling units per acre, as Ms. Campione said before, the Mayhill came out to about 3 dwelling units per acre, just a little bit above. Well, it's the same criteria that's going to apply to. You're not going to get there from here. You're going to get something that's closer to about a 2.5, 2.6, possibly even less than that, depending on if there are wetlands or other criteria, by the way the comprehensive plan and our land development regulations are currently written. If you're having to take out a wetland, you're having to remove some certain other criteria. But it really was a copy over. It isn't anything that's set in stone. If it's more comfortable to use the rural residential's 35%, we can use the rural residential's 35% within the table and within the comprehensive plan, and then translate those over into the land development regulations.
So just to clarify,
I know that was a lot of babbling, I apologize.
sure. Open space requirement in rural residential is 35%.
I believe so, yes.
Currently. Open space requirement in suburban residential is 25%.
Yes.
And so what we're proposing for RRT is 25%, consistent with the suburban category, but lower than the rural category.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Related to some of the discussion about working with the county, it's certainly the will of the commission as to what you would have us do. One possibility in talking with our development services folks is some of the suggestions from Commissioner Campione in the email and here in person could potentially be incorporated into our land development regulations. What that would do is it would give you the ability to forward the comprehensive plan amendments to City Commission for consideration. If you chose to approve those comprehensive plan amendments, we could forward them to the state for review as is required for comprehensive plan amendments. If we were to look to incorporate some of these rural design standards, work with the county staff and the county commission and try to incorporate some of these things, we could do it on the land development regulation side, which is approved by you. 2 readings of an ordinance can amend our land development regulations. And so what that would do is that would affect ordinance number 22-36, which is the next item on the agenda. And so what I'm saying is if you'd like, you can forward 2235 to City Commission for consideration. And at the City Commission meeting, if you chose to transmit that or approve that and transmit it to the state on first reading, we're not going to hear back from the state for a couple of months on that. And that would give us an opportunity to work with county staff and the county commission to see if there are items that they have that do work for us and we would like to incorporate into our land development regulations. And so I guess my recommendation would be forward the comprehensive plan amendments 2235 to City Commission for consideration. And if you choose to send those, approve that and send those to the state, we can do that. And we can continue to work with the county to see if we do want to incorporate some of their recommendations into our land development regulations.
I have questions of Tom on any of this.
And then just not transmit 2236.
Well, 2236 does not get transmitted
doesn't
to the
get
state
transmitted.
because that's local approval.
All right, so we,
So you could,
that's right.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
It depends on who you're transmitting. You can transmit to the City Commission
Commission.
for consideration.
Yeah.
But 2236 does not get transmitted to the state. So you could forward it to City Commission for consideration.
And then
You
just,
could even approve it on first reading, knowing that we wouldn't final approve on second reading until we've met with the county.
okay.
And we've worked cooperatively on some potential changes.
And then we would have to address it again then, because there would be changes in it, correct?
Well, what I'm recommending is that
To the state.
we can move forward with 2235 as is, transmit it to the state for consideration, and still amend our land development regulations with 2236 as part of working cooperatively with the county.
I have to admit, I'm intrigued.
I don't-
I want to see,
Yeah,
because there's some things in there that,
there's some positive in
yeah,
this.
yeah. So
Yes.
I'm intrigued, you know.
So things like boundary buffers, it's been mentioned, you know, potentially a 100-foot buffer with surrounding properties, potentially doing a PUD overlay, looking at maintaining wildlife corridors, conservation areas. I think those are all things that we could look at as part of our land development
Exactly.
regulations.
But go ahead and send it, the comprehensive plan, to the state.
I think what we as staff would recommend is move forward with 2235 on,
To the state.
again, first step is to transmit it to city commission later this evening
Yes.
for consideration. If you choose to approve that on first reading, transmit to the state, let the state review it, and they will send it back to us over the next few months. And during that time, we can work cooperatively with the county.
And if we wanted to make any changes to when the state came, you know,
Right.
then we can just amend it again and send it back, or?
I think we can always make changes to our comprehensive
Yeah.
plan, but there is that state review process as
Yes,
part of that.
so.
So we could,
Might not be as long as if there was maybe just 2 or 3 little changes, you know, and depending on what
Yeah.
they say too, you never know what they're gonna come back with either.
yeah, I can't speak to the timing, but we can
Yeah,
always amend the comp plan and retransmit to the state based on what we would like to do.
How realistic is it 30 days?
I think it's realistic. I think, now, of course, we have the holidays coming up, and
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, it wouldn't be unilateral county decision or county staff decision and city staff decision. This would be something that we probably would involve the county commission, and we would certainly involve the city commission. So
And-
we'd have to look at calendars and dates and meeting dates
And
and,
see, that's the thing that concerns me. I know that they can get their stuff done. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm just worried about us getting our stuff done.
Yeah,
You know, if we're gonna do it, I'd like for us to do it.
I think we can pull the staffs together relatively easily. As to county and city commission meetings, we'll have to work on the calendar.
and I do know that Leslie has talked to her staff, and she feels comfortable with 30 days on a review with working through it. So,
Okay, I say we transmit.
well, Karen, do you have any input, ma'am? Emily, anything else? All right then. So let's bring it back to the commission here. On ordinance number 22-35, looking for a motion to transmit this to the city commission for consideration at the city commission meeting.
So moved.
Okay,
A second.
all right, so we've got a first and second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner LaHope Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Cobb,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lee,
Aye.
Mayor Holland.
Aye. All right, now we're coming down to ordinance 22-36. Mike?
Yes, sir. Okay. So, in essence, this is almost identical. It does have the same type language. We are basically taking the rural residential transitional future land use district and inserting it into the land development code. And it does involve, one of the things I will point out, during the discussions we did with the backyard chickens type discussion, you know, we did talk about putting that type of use, the livestock type use within the agricultural and the rural residential type categories. And so as we were discussing this new type district, we thought, okay, why not just insert it into, or allow the livestock use to also be a use permitted within this type category. So this proposal does include that, and you know, in essence, we did remove the general agricultural type use as a conditional type use from all of the other districts. Originally, in the Land Development Code, we had a table of, or a chart that had conditional uses under each category or under each district, and we did remove those conditional use issues there. And again, if this were my revision of the document that I handed you, the small booklet, these would be the page inserts that I would include within that document. And again, you can see just, again, the category, the intent, and a chart that pretty much showed the intensity. And again, that chart did include the, I think it was a impervious surface of 40% in that particular category. But again, we were looking at just the 3 units per acre for the category. And again, we would change the table of uses pretty much to just allow most of the uses that are allowed within the suburban residential and rural residential categories. Now, what's missing in the rural residential transitional category is the multifamily. We extracted that from the chart, so we're simply a rural type district there. And again, made some small adjustments to a chart or two. Let me try again. And again, we did add one section in the accessory portion of the code or the regulations, and that pretty much involves the agricultural livestock structures, which includes avian and domestic fowl, and in essence, that would pertain to the chicken coop and those sorts of structures, and the fact that we would like to see everything at least 10 feet off of the property lines and not any closer than the 10 feet to any type of boundary or property line there. So, but that would actually be the gist of it. And again, we were.
Can you go back to that last one?
Yes, sir. Let me try again. Okay.
Mike, while you're looking for that, is this 25% open space or is it the 35?
Sorry?
25% open space or 35?
I want to say. All right. I'm
It's
sorry.
the smaller button in back.
All right. I'll get
Okay,
it.
right there.
I've got it. Let's see here. I think it may have been in there, Mayor.
Well, one section I can't read at all.
I
so.
can't either.
Now it
Again.
says on here, the structure may not be closer to the property line than 5 feet? Or am I reading the wrong thing?
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
I see 10 feet up top, I'm sorry.
Let's see.
Okay, all right, I'm good.
25. Well, on the particular chart, I don't know that was actually the open space issue. I think the open space within and outside the Wekiva on the land development chart was talking, I think it was 25%. I think I just left it. Again, with that suburban type use.
Okay. Anybody else have questions of Mike? All right, Tom?
I'm sorry, just one minor thing I wanted to point out. Related to domestic fowl, we're making the changes that it's no longer a conditional use in all of the other categories. It's permitted in rural residential and agricultural. It will be permitted in RRT, but only continued agricultural uses. In other words, if you're in the county and you have an agricultural use, you annex into the city and get RRT, you can continue that agricultural use.
Okay.
But upon development, correct, we wrote it so that when that property then develops, then the livestock and domestic fowl would not be permitted. So RRT allows continued agricultural use, but not agricultural use post-development. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And what's considered development?
I think it's subdivision.
Yeah.
That was the impact, would be
Okay.
on subdividing the property. Basically encouraging and allowing individuals who are already out there, who maybe want utilities, but they don't want to be able to lose keeping the horse in the backyard, keeping their chickens, keeping their pigeons, whatever.
A family of 5, each getting 2 acres, would that be considered a development?
We could probably not include, or we could probably rewrite it or amend the language a little bit to clarify that, like, if somebody did a lot split, that would.
Okay, all right, okay. I think I'd like that.
All right.
So related to what well, I do have cards.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear
Let's hear
from the
them.
public?
Yeah.
Cindy Newton?
And before Cindy comes up, I'd like to say, these ladies are so prepared.
I know.
Yeah, every time they come here, they're really prepared, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Cindy Newton, for the record, unincorporated Lake County. And one of my concerns, besides wanting you to consider what Commissioner Capion has been talking about, is the fact that the AG is only temporary. And all the language throughout, it's stated differently, but it's always stated that it's only in place for a certain reason. And I don't think people that are currently being brought into annexation understand that. And I'm wondering if that is going to be part of any annexations when they're being talked about and you're saying you can keep your AG, we're making either RR or RRT, but you're not going to be able to keep the AG if we end up developing. Or if you start developing around it, and, then what happens? So I think it's pretty vague on a lot of issues. It just seems a bit rushed. And I would really appreciate you taking the time and the effort to meet with the county and see if you can iron out some of these things. Thank you.
Maybe I can clarify if a property is ag or RR, they can continue that agricultural use in perpetuity, regardless of what they do. If you are the new proposed RRT, that would be the only district where the ag would be dependent on future development, if that makes sense. So if you annex with agricultural future land use, you can continue that ag use in perpetuity, regardless of what you do.
Okay. Who's next, Tom?
Tammy Pena?
Hello again, Tammy Pena, 35800 Burgess Terrace. On this one with the land use regulations, if you look at the chart, section 109.3, district development intensity chart, you'll see table 1, the intensity limitations by land use. Staff is recommending a 40% maximum impervious surface percentage of net buildable area for this new RRT land use district, but this is inconsistent and does not match the comp plan changes they requested in the previous ordinance for table A.3.1, future land use designations, where they recommended the maximum impervious surface to be 35%. Therefore, the comp plan and land use contradict each other and state 2 different percent values. I ask that you correct the RRT maximum impervious surface percentage from the 40 to the 35% so it matches what the staff's recommendation on the comp plan ordinance previously was. And that way it'll match the commission's request for an intense density between the rural that's at 20% and the suburban that's at 40%. And that way you won't have the inconsistencies of them not matching.
Thank you, Tammy.
I'm Pat Duncan. Were you planning to speak on this item as well? And then Commissioner Campion.
Okay, just a couple comments. I think Tammy's was definitely a good comment to make them consistent, so you don't have an inconsistency between your comp plan and your LDRs. With regard to the suggestion about moving ahead to the state on the comp plan amendment and then making your changes in your LDRs, I would just ask you to consider the importance of this issue, and that when something's in the comp plan, it holds a lot more weight. It has a lot more authority to it. And so I think that it would be a really valuable message to send, to have your comp plan include some language about either a PD overlay being required, so that you get to do some site-specific review of every parcel that comes in this particular area, considering it is in the Wekiva study area, and you're also moving into an area that's pretty rural in nature. And so I think that could be really impactful, to have that language in there in your comp plan. So either a PD overlay or you incorporate the rural design elements. I am a little concerned about pending applications that might come in, so that if you don't go ahead and try to get this right before you transmit it to DCA, or DCA, those are the old days, Department of Economic Opportunity, that it might leave the window open for an application comes in, and then there's an argument, yeah, but we thought these were the rules, and now these are the rules. And so I think the 30 days could really help as far as getting it right before it's actually sent up to Tallahassee. I do think this could be done with staff, because the county commission is super familiar with the rural conservation design already. So we understand it. I think our staff would be in a good position just to work with your staff to come back with something that could sort of blend that language into your code in a way that wouldn't necessarily have to be exactly the same. It'd be great if it was, but I think at this point, if we can get some elements that are in the rural conservation design in there, it would really be impactful in the long run. And those are my comments. I do also think the Wekiva River Basin Commission, they'll definitely take an interest in this. They will probably weigh in to the Department of Economic Opportunity. So if they see that you're working in the design standards, or you're putting something more than just a straight density in your comp plan, I think that could go a long way too, to helping them feel comfortable with it, so that they don't raise objections with the state.
Thank you, Leslie. Anybody
Those
else?
are all the cards.
All right. Tom, anything else to follow up with, anything?
No, I guess the only, what I would say is, I think I would recommend that you forward this item to the city commission, and then we have a conversation regarding this at city commission,
All right.
as opposed to not forwarding it and then prohibiting any discussion at city commission.
All right. All right, Commissioners, before us we have ordinance number 22-36, looking for a motion to transfer this to the City Commission for further consideration.
So moved.
Thank you. Have a first and second. Any further discussion? Not hearing any. Roll call, please.
Commissioner LaHope Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Cobb, Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lee,
Aye.
Mayor Holland.
Aye. All right. We will adjourn this meeting and come back at 6 o'clock with a regular City Commission meeting.